Awesome. Liz, are we all in? Everyone's here. Okay. Hi, everyone.
Who's managing the waiting room and letting?
Sorry, I can just send Natasha anymore. Okay.
Natasha or Robert, will one of you let me know when everyone's in?
Yeah, I can let you know. However, I will note that folks are just coming in. There doesn't seem to be in it. They're just freely coming in, which is fine. I'm not letting them in.
It's probably because it was scheduled to start at 7, so maybe there's not a waiting room.
Mm-hmm. All right.
No, I think it was we do have 3 more people. Oh, never mind.
Is everyone in?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see anyone waiting.
Excellent. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for attending the City Council Candidate Forum on Racial Justice. My name is Jane Stevenson. I am a core member of the Western Mass chapter of Showing Up for Racial Justice. SURGE is a national network that mobilizes white folks to join the multiracial movement for racial justice with commitment and accountability. The Western Mass chapter was launched in 2014 and has lately been engaged in work around Black and Indigenous reparations.
And I am Yaping Douglas. I come to you from Northampton Abolition now, called NAN. NAN was formed following the uprisings in the summer of 2020 and is committed to advancing racial and economic justice by organizing to divest from policing and invest in our community. NAN is working to grow and support community-led initiatives that are accountable to those who are most harmed by policing, and we welcome the support of anyone who wants to help imagine and create a Northampton community grounded in justice and accountability that meets the needs of all people.
We are excited to get started with our forum tonight. As we come together to consider the future of Northampton, it's equally important to recognize its past. The land, now called Northampton, is the home of many Native people, including the Nipmuc and the Pecumtuck people. Indigenous people live on this land today. In a forum like this, where city government is being discussed, it is vital to acknowledge and recognize that we are on stolen land. There are steps that non-Native people can take to act in solidarity with Indigenous communities to begin the long process of repairing the harm that settler colonialism has caused. Those of us who benefit today from the violent dispossession of Native lands can work to rectify those historic harms by writing to our elected officials to support the Massachusetts Indigenous Legislative Agenda, which includes 5 priority bills for 21-22. We can pay reparation monies in direct support of Indigenous sovereignty and healing. We can advocate for land back initiatives. We can support local Indigenous cultural centers. Information about all these actions and other ways to show solidarity can be found in the chat. Before launching the Candidate Forum on Racial Justice, we will take 1 minute in silence to reflect on the history of this land and to center our intention toward reparative action. Again, sitting in silence is a start, but we encourage every non-native person in this forum to take additional action toward repairing the harm that those of us who are settlers have caused.
So the purpose of this forum is to ask our city council candidates to reflect on their commitment to racial justice issues. The candidates were given the questions a few days ago, along with links to many resources that helped us formulate our questions. I'm now going to turn it over to Robert, another volunteer with Northampton Abolition Now, to share some additional important background on this event.
Hi everyone, I'm Robert Eastman, another volunteer with Northampton Abolition Now, or NAN. Before we start this forum, we feel it's important for the public to know that 3 city council candidates, Jim Nash, Stan Moulton, and Marissa Elkins, declined our invitations to participate in our racial justice candidate forum. As a gesture of good faith and transparency, we shared all questions with the candidates in advance and provided participants with resources to ensure that they understood the intent behind our questions clearly. All candidates would have had the opportunity to respond to the same questions without any editorial interventions from moderators. In our view, this approach of the forum demonstrated clearly our commitment to open dialogue inclusive of all candidates. Councillor Nash declined on the grounds that the forum would not be impartial. Candidate Moulton invoked concerns that the forum would be partisan and not offer a level playing field. And candidate Elkins named Northampton Abolition Now, having already endorsed candidates as a primary reason for withdrawing her participation. Given that all candidates were sent the same questions with the same resources ahead of time, and given that the forum tonight and tomorrow consists only of moderators asking each candidate the same questions, we are sincerely confused as to how our support for candidates who have shown strong, concrete commitments to racial and economic justice affects our forum's mission of engaging in critical and open dialogue about issues of racial justice that have not yet been addressed in the forums, interviews, and questionnaires candidates have already participated in. We're dismayed that these candidates have chosen to refuse an invitation to the only candidate forum which focuses directly on racial and economic justice, hosted by 2 organizations which focus solely on these issues. We support any candidate who shows a real commitment to racial and economic justice, and we are strongly committed to dispassionate public education around these issues. NAN would be thrilled to endorse additional candidates who demonstrate that they stand by our values. NAN hopes that one day we can endorse every single candidate running for office, because that will mean our community has developed a strong consensus in favor of racial justice. True fairness and a level playing field requires radically transforming our society. Candidates who claim to be ready to lead on these issues must, at a minimum, have the courage to talk to their neighbors and community members. At the very least, we hope that candidates missing this forum will submit answers to the questions in writing so that the public can see where they stand on these pressing issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. We want to also note that David Murphy could not make it tonight, but he plans on joining us for tomorrow's forum. Okay, let's begin. Each candidate will answer most of the same questions. Answers will be brief, and we ask that candidates help us to move the forum along by keeping answers to within the time limits provided. We also ask that audience members mute themselves. We are going to start with allowing candidates to introduce themselves. They'll have 1 minute to do so. We'll start with Jamila Gore. Okay, go ahead, Jamila, you have 1 minute.
Hi, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that Serge and Nan have hosted this event tonight. Racial justice and economic justice are a strong part of my platform. I think, like I said at Lathrop Community last night, that a lot of the issues that are in my platform are intertwined within each other. And I feel like economic justice and racial justice are intertwined in all my platform issues, from the Department of Community Care to revitalizing Main Street, climate justice, and housing affordability. I think that without addressing the core reasons behind racial and economic injustice, we can't move forward as an egalitarian society. And I think that is what Northampton needs to be now and is always strived for. I mean, Northampton was an abolitionist community way back in the 1800s, and I think it can be now again. And I would hope that that we can move forward in a way that would be like make Northampton a flagship city in how it approaches a lot of racial and economic justice issues. So that's, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll move on to Michael. You'll have 1 minute plus a little extra.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Quinlan. I am the city councilor currently in Ward 1 of Northampton. I really appreciate the invitation to be with you this evening. I've learned a tremendous amount in my 2 short years on council about our community's health and safety, racial justice in our community. And I say that with gratitude to many of you here. I've made it a cornerstone of my first term and pledge future service that I will always listen and learn. I will do my best to listen and learn. And I'm here tonight to answer your questions, but I assure you that when you reach out to me, I will be respectful and I will try to learn from you. I strive to gather as much information as I can to try and find the right decisions for Northampton. I hope by the end of this forum, you have a good understanding of who I am and what my beliefs are, and that you'll get 2 votes on Tuesday for city councilor at large, and I would be honored to have one.
Excellent. Thank you, both of you, very much. Just a note here, some of our questions reference 2 important documents the town of Northampton commissioned. One is called Unlocking Opportunity, an assessment of barriers to fair housing in Northampton. And the other is called the Northampton Police Review Commission Report. When possible, we will provide excerpts from these reports when we are asking questions that reference them.
And before we start with the first question, we'll listen to a 3-minute audio clip from the podcast Intercept with Chenjerai Kumanika. Is that not playing? Just going to reload.
Just so everybody knows, we practiced this like 700 times, so sorry.
Reloading, bear with me.
The killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis cops was another horrific and needless death, another unarmed Black man killed by police and recorded for all the world to see. It was another spectacle of violence at the hands of the state. And we've seen this before, like literally, we've seen it. Black men choked by police in broad daylight, uprisings against the carceral state, police and prisons, and pictures that prove that torture is going on in the institutions of criminal punishment. And we see the police are mostly not held accountable. They don't get fired. They don't get charged. And in the few cases where they do get charged, it's extremely rare for them to be convicted. But what is right before our eyes and on our cameras is not the entire picture of the change that needs to happen. If we look off camera and back just a little bit into history, we can see the conclusive failure of the kinds of reforms that established Democrats are proposing right now. Yes, use of force legislation is crucial. But remember, a judge found Officer Pantaleo guilty of using a banned chokehold when he killed Eric Garner. Pantaleo is free today. Also, as African-American studies professor Naomi Murakawa has pointed out, the concept of community policing was at the heart of the 2 largest crime reform legislative efforts of the 20th century. The first one was sponsored by Lyndon B. Johnson, the 1968 Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Street Act, which created the Law Enforcement Administration. What did that result in? $10 billion was doled out to police departments, often in the name of improving police and community relations. This didn't mean treating people differently. It meant taxpayer money was spent on police public relations campaigns. The second major criminal reform effort was the Clintons' 1994 crime bill. This established the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services within the Justice Department. And what did that result in? $9 billion given to police departments over 6 years. And yet, here we are. What we have to grapple with is this. These images are showing us a violence that's so clear that we've stopped being able to see beyond it. The spectacle of violence is only the tip of the spear. It's only the most acute manifestation of 150 years of racist state violence, punishing the poor, and failed reform. More training workshops for cops or another black police chief is not going to fix this. Cops who kneel with protesters and then stand up and tear gas them is not going to fix this. What would it look like to try something else? To defund and dismantle police departments. And yes, to abolish the police. What would it look like to abolish prisons?
So for question 1, we'll stay in the same order as we did for introductions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. And we'll start with Jamila. So what is your understanding of the Movement for Black Lives' stance on police reforms that give more power, money, and legitimacy to police, such as more police training, community policing, co-responder programs, and more? And why do you think this is their stance? Go ahead, Jamila.
So my understanding of the Black Lives Matter movement's stance on police reform is that it's something that has been tried and doesn't work. I think that they've said that body cams and police training and implicit bias training and all those kinds of things have been tried by many different departments across the country, and they still have violent actions against civilians that happen in those same departments that have those trainings. So in my understanding, those things from the Black Lives Matter movement perspective are not working anymore, and we need to find a new imaginative way to address policing in our country and to look at it differently and to not have it be looked at from the carceral state model, but looked at from a different model, and a model of community safety and community building and taking care of each other instead of looking for the carceral state to take care of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamila. And now, Michael, you will have 2 minutes to answer the same question. Would you like me to reread it, or are you?
No, I'm okay with this one. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the second part first, about why this stance is their stance in the Movement for Black Lives. I mean, I think it's important to look at the history of the attempts to reform policing and to put guidelines in place. And America has done this. We've put a lot of guidelines in place, as mentioned in the audio clip. You know, I also think it's important to kind of recognize that the Northampton Police Department has always adopted those guidelines as the newest best practice, right? So this is something that here we've looked at and said, okay, this is the new guideline. We're gonna do this. They've always tried to be there, understanding that this community doesn't expect to tolerate police brutality. Over time, the United States has invested countless dollars in reform and training and retraining. Yet, unfortunately, we still see violence towards the most marginalized populations. And I think that's why this stance exists. You know, the results of this idea of reform and training, the results, they haven't come as concretely as people want. So my understanding of this is that the Movement for Black Lives is asking that we try and do this differently. The engagement I've had with NAN and my role as a counselor and a council appointee to the Northampton Policing Review Commission has given me a chance to converse and learn quite a bit from the resources that, not just the ones that we received this week, but over the past 20 months for me. The Movement for Black Lives stance is about divesting from police, taking responsibilities from the duties of police and moving them to an investment focused outside of the carceral system. I think what's important to understand is that no one wants a situation where the community doesn't have those services. And as a result, I think if we want to make these changes to emergency response, especially here in Northampton, we have to work hard at this. We have to take steps. I don't think we can take step 10 until we've taken the first 9. But education and building community trust and understanding is very important.
Thanks, Jamila and Michael, for that. So that was great, really helpful. Question number 2 is going to have 2 parts. And this question relates to the 90+ page report the city released in 2018 called Unlocking Opportunity and Assessment of Barriers to Fair Housing in Northampton. This report gave an overview of the housing situation in Northampton, and some recommendations included rent stabilization or rent control, investing in public transportation, and creating more affordable housing. It's a 2-part question. The first part, you will each have a minute to respond, but we're going to do both parts. We're going to start with Michael, do both parts, and then do Jamila both parts. So you're going to have 1 minute to respond to this. The question is, what would you do as city councilor to address affordable housing, renters' rights, and issues that residents without homes in Northampton face? Michael, go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's important that we take a very wide view of helping people who are struggling with housing insecurity. I was pleased today, I got an email from the mayor's office that the Whiting Street Fund Committee, which is a grant program that the city manages, I used to be a member of the Whiting Street Fund Committee, is devoting their resources this year to housing issues, housing security issues. But I think, I'd like to continue the work the city has begun on infill zoning and the creation of the Community Resiliency Hub. I think this needs to provide resources for the entire community. There's a lot of discussion about it being there being resources there for houseless people, but I think renters need to have access as well, right through that same community hub. I think we also need to figure out a way to engage with property owners and landlords in a discussion about what's best for our community. Resources can be made available for them to help their renters get their bills paid, as well as creating fair lease terms. I think we should also begin discussions with cities and towns around us to address houselessness that plagues our region. This is not a Northampton issue alone, and there are models of which we already pull resources of other cities and towns, and I think we can do that here too.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so for part 2, I'm going to ask you to rate.
Recording in progress.
For part 2, there'll be some recommendations of the barrier to access report, and I'd like for you to provide your rating of importance on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being not at all important and 10 being imperative. And just landing on a number is what's important right now. And then after you've rated these 3 recommendations, you'll have a minute to kind of riff on what your rating, how your rating was established. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
All right. So on a scale of 0 to 10, your rate of importance for rent control and rent stabilization.
I have it as a 10.
Okay. And how about investing in public transportation?
A 10.
Okay, great. And creating more affordable housing?
Also a 10.
Okay, great. Thanks. So now you have a minute to explain your ideas.
I didn't find the concept of any of these in the abstract particularly controversial. I think they all appear as logical pursuits to reducing barriers to housing access. Rent control is the one that would be the most controversial because you have property owners, landlords, and that are paying taxes. They have property values that are going up, so their taxes are going up. The average, this by the way, is also like the previous answer, not a Northampton only situation. The average home sale in Massachusetts is now over $400,000. Supply and demand is really important. And that's where the zoning comes in for infill, but very difficult to try to control rents for people whose taxes are going up. I also would just mention, I think public transportation and affordable housing go hand in hand. You know, I actually had a conversation recently with Sheriff Pat Kaling about his Rocky Hill Reentry Collaborative and how the men that are there now, as they've come out of jail, are using the bus to get to work. Most of them have jobs and they're using the bus to get to work. So I think this investment is a great example of why public transportation is so important to helping people.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Jamila, would you like for me to read the question again, the first question?
Yes, please.
Okay. The question is, what would you do as city councillor to address affordable housing, renters' rights, and issues that residents without homes in Northampton face? You'll have 1 minute.
Well, as a renter, this is a very dear issue to my heart. I've been a renter the whole time I've lived here for 14 years. I've bounced from place to place. I've lived in 5 of the 7 wards, and it's been hard to find stable housing. One thing that helped me get stable housing was having a subsidized housing unit. And I think we need more of those throughout the city. We also need more single room occupancies throughout the city. That would help with houselessness as well. And also more services that can help people get from a houseless or housing insecure situation to a more secure situation. I know ServiceNet helps with that, but also like having the Resilience Hub, be a drop-in center that could help with getting people in that transition from being houseless or housing insecure to having secure housing.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, now I'm going to give you that funny little rating thing, 0 being not at all important and 10 being imperative. What is your rating of the recommendation of rent control and rent stabilization?
That's a 10.
Okay, how about investing in public transportation?
Definitely a 10.
Excellent. And creating more affordable housing?
10.
All right. And now you have 1 minute to share your thoughts about your ratings.
Well, I know when I was looking for a place to live, public transportation was a big part of it. It can be limiting to where people can go if they have to depend on public transportation. So I know that I would love to see public transportation expanded to even have it go later at night for people who live in town. I know it goes late at night for the schools and the universities and the students, but for people in town, it needs to go later, in my opinion. I also really think affordable housing needs to be a forefront issue that the council talks about and deliberates on a regular basis. I mean, they've done great with figuring out zoning laws and infill development and all that, but we need to take it a step further and make it a central conversation that the council has during its deliberations.
So thank you very much, both of you.
Yes, thank you, Jamila and Michael. For our next question, we are going to play another 3-minute audio clip, this time with longtime abolitionist organizer and activist Mariam Kaba in preparation for question 3.
So what I mean, and I think some other PIC abolitionists mean by PIC abolition, is that we want to end the whole system of reinforcing relationships between surveillance, policing, the courts, imprisonment that fuel, maintain, and expand social and economic inequality, institutional racism, capitalism. So it's not
I'll try to reload, sorry. Sorry, everyone, we're gonna try that again.
So what I mean.
Oops. Sensitive mouse here, okay.
So what I mean, and I think some other PIC abolitionists mean by PIC abolition, is that we want to end the whole system of reinforcing relationships between surveillance, policing, the courts, imprisonment that fuel, maintain, and expand social and economic inequality, institutional racism, capitalism. So it's not just prisons, which is why it's really more accurate to talk about PIC abolition. I would add that it means that we're really interested in kind of doing away with the system rather than finding ways to make it work better or for it to be kinder and gentler. Because at its bottom, abolitionists, PIC abolitionists, don't see the prison industrial complex as like broken, the way that if you hear a lot of reformers talk, they talk about the criminal punishment system being broken. Abolitionists really think, nah, actually, it's working really, really well at surveilling and policing and imprisoning and killing exactly the people that it's targeting. And so our job as PIC abolitionists is to work to diminish drastically the scope and the power of the prison industrial complex while we're simultaneously increasing the ability of the communities that are targeted by it to be stronger, to be more self-determined, to be healthier. And as part of that, and as part of our practice, we're always asking consistently, what is actual accountability? What is safety? What can justice look like and feel like? And what are the ways that we can actually build our worlds so that violence in all of its forms is addressed and reduced? That's a huge part, I think, of what a lot of people don't understand about PIC abolitionists is that we're really concerned with ending the sources of violence, right? We think prisons don't actually solve violence because they're inherently violent. And we think that they're actually a very concentrated form of violence and that prisons are designed to actually bring premature death. So if you're an abolitionist, a PIC abolitionist, and your concerns are about harm and violence, then you don't want to quote unquote end violence by using violence. That's a huge kind of no-no. And so a big part of the work is to expose that the logic of using prisons and policing and punishment have actually not proven effective to address the systemic causes of violence. And PIC abolition is about challenging those logics that make those institutions and practices possible. So that's how I do define PIC abolition for myself. And it's also in part how I try to talk about it with people in my life, you know.
Okay, so question 3. You'll each have 2 minutes to respond. And let's start this round with Jamila, then on to Michael. What is your definition of abolition and what informs your understanding of abolition? Go ahead, Jamila.
So just going off the clip that we just heard, I think surveillance is a big part of the prison industrial complex. That's why in 2017, I really got involved in council meetings that were fighting against having surveillance cameras in downtown Northampton. And going to council meetings and hearing the impassioned public comment and hearing the discourse between the councilors and the public and how the councilors listened to that made me want to run for city council for this city, because I feel like in this city, people can be heard. And that's what I love about our city and our city council. And I think, in my opinion, that my idea of abolition is not something that's going to happen overnight, not something that's going to, just take away every system that we have in place right now, but something that's going to gradually take place as we get more imaginative about what we're going to do to take care of ourselves and to take care of each other and to be a more community-based society. I think that a lot of people get abolition confused and think it means that we're going to get rid of everything right now. We're not going to have any systems in place for safety. And I think that that's not correct. I think we need to have systems in place for safety, And I think we need to just reimagine what those systems are going to be. And I think that's what the core of abolition is reimagining what our systems of safety are going to be, because the current ones are not safe for everyone. They might be safe for some people, but they're not safe for everyone.
Thank you, Jamila. And now, Michael, would you like me to read the question again? Or?
No, I have it on the screen here. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael.
So I think, in a technical way, abolish, of course, means to end something. So when using the terms of abolish the police, it states a clear meaning, but it sounds so disruptive. My understanding of abolishment of the police is a divestment of tax dollars in the police department and a movement of at least some of the duties of police into other services and funding those with the dollars formerly used for policing. Like I mentioned in question 1, no one wants to lose these services. No one wants to call for help and not get it. As a representative for all in Northampton, I find it a must to make people feel safe. In the Policing Review Commission, we talked a lot and we kind of came up with a number of about 85% of people in Northampton, I'm one of them, feels totally comfortable calling 911. But if, as an elected official, your goal should be 100. It should be that everyone has access to safe services when they need them. And I think if Northampton is going to make more changes, more moves of services, we have to make it a huge priority to explain this to the community, how the services that they're paying their tax dollars for are going to be delivered. And like I said before, build confidence in the transformation of those services from one department to another. One clear way to build confidence here is going to be with the success of the Department of Community Care. In a few years, if that department is doing all we wanted to do and do it really well, that's going to give the community comfort to try other things. Mayor Narkowitz said in his budget this year, 25 years ago, the city moved 911 dispatching to a civilian dispatch unit instead of having it done by fire and police officers, and that there was a lot of outcry against it. But now we look back on that now and think this has worked out really well. These people have done a great job in dispatch and they continue to. So, to me, that's a lot of what abolition is about, is about, transforming services from one thing to another. And we can do it here with confidence building.
Oh my goodness, thank you. I was having a really hard time unmuting. I kept pressing and I felt really silenced for a second there. Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Jamila, for that thoughtful answer to that question. For question number 4, you will each have 2 minutes to respond. We're going to start this time with you, Michael. And here goes the question. Last year, the city of Evanston, Illinois, formed a reparations fund from a sales tax on recreational marijuana that attempts to address past and present harm to Black residents, including home ownership grants. Asheville, North Carolina, also formed a reparations initiative last year that funds programs around home ownership and career opportunities for Black residents, but does not offer direct payments. And locally, Amherst has created the African Heritage Reparations Assembly to research and propose a reparations plan that will include a fund and a community-wide process of reconciliation and repair for harms against Black people. In this context of municipalities creating reparation funds and attempting community repair and reconciliation, how do you propose that the city of Northampton begin to reckon with its past and current harm to Black residents? Michael, go ahead.
Thank you. I understand that right now there's already some informal groups discussing this, and that seems to be the first way to start, right, is to build grassroots ideas around issues that you would like the city to eventually address. I was the first city councillor to speak out in public meeting asking for the Policing Review Commission. I didn't know what it would be called. I didn't know exactly what it would be, but I was the first councillor to ask for that. And a number of other councillors joined me in that. And I think, for Northampton to move forward on an issue like reparations, we really need to devote a similar kind of attention to the issue. We need to create high-level discussions. similarly to Amherst, they've put together a group. We should put together a group to study it and make recommendations to the mayor and the council. So I think, but similar to the Policing Review Commission, studying the issue and the options are important. But I think this is also a committee that should have proper representation of BIPOC residents of Northampton that can help lead the discussion and really help figure out the right path. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Jamila, do you want me to read the question again, or do you feel like you have a handle on it?
No, I have a handle on it. Thanks.
Great, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. So I was reached out to about an informal reparations group. It was someone who was reaching out to people of color in the area. And I think it's good to start those groups with BIPOC folks to see where they would stand on the issue. And I think that's what they did in Amherst. I'm not sure if that's what they did in Evanston, but I like the idea that in Evanston, Illinois, they had it come from the marijuana industry, because so many communities of color have been negatively impacted and unjustly impacted by being incarcerated in high rates for marijuana possession when, not communities of color are profiting off it. So I think that if there was some way that Northampton could incorporate that into their reparation system, that would be great. We have a lot of, medicinal and recreational marijuana shops in our town. And I think that there's a lot of profit that's right there that could be used for reparations to African-American people in our community. I think that it can be a tricky thing to figure out, like what's the best mode to go about. Should it be housing? Should it be a fund? So I think that is a bigger issue that needs to be discussed, is how to repair the damages done by the historical damages done by slavery and things like that to the African American community. So I think for a group that would talk about reparations, the biggest thing would be how to make those reparations and what kind of reparations there would be, whether they be housing or whether they be a fund or whatever people come up with.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Michael and Jamila. We will now swing back to the Northampton Policing Review Commission report for this question, for the next question. You will each have 2 minutes to answer. We'll start with Jamila, then go to Michael. So the report recommended the formation of the new community care department. What principles should be prioritized when selecting members for the yet to be formed advisory board? I'm going to read 2 choices. A, the advisory board should be committed to non-coercive, non-punitive principles and approaches, and only be open to members who agree to work in support of those values. Or B, the advisory board does not need to be committed to non-coercive, non-punitive principles and approaches. Please choose A or B, and then we will follow up with clarifying questions. Go ahead, Jamila.
I would choose A.
Okay, and what does A look like to you, an advisory board that is committed to non-coercive, non-punitive principles and approaches?
So that type of advisory board looks like a knowledgeable one about different practices in policing and has informed ideas about alternative practices to coercion, to what we're used to seeing with traditional policing. And I think it would take, knowledgeable people to come together to bring that. And I would hope that we could get people with that knowledge base, people who have studied abolition of the carceral system people who have studied how to best bring about those kind of changes. So I would hope that we could find those type of people for that job.
Thank you. And is there anything else you'd like to elaborate on in the other minute for your answer?
No, I think that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now Michael, how about I'll go ahead and reread the question just since it had a couple parts. Okay. So the report, the Northampton Policing Review Commission report recommended the formation of the now new Community Care Department. What principles should be prioritized when selecting members for the yet to be formed advisory board? A, the advisory board should be committed to non-coercive, non-punitive principles and approaches, and only be open to members who agree to work in support of those values. Or B, the advisory board does not need to be committed to non-coercive, non-punitive principles and approaches. Please choose A or B, and then we will follow up with clarifying questions.
I would choose A.
Okay, and would you like to share about what A means to you or what it looks like?
Absolutely. I mean, I think first and foremost, just to kind of put a fine point on why I think A, I mean, if we're trying to decriminalize, you know, non-criminal, non-violent emergencies, then non-coercive, non-punitive principles are vital to me. I would just also say that as a member of the Policing Review Commission, I agreed with the concept of the advisory board. In a lot of ways, it's the second most important recommendation. I'm committed to seeing it created, even speaking out this year in council for the expeditious creation of this board. I had hoped it would be in place so that it could be included in the hiring of employees of the department. That hasn't happened yet. But I often think about what is the way to measure success of the Department of Community Care. And to quote my fellow Northampton Policing Review Commissioner Javier Luengo-Garrido, the only way to measure success is by the community being engaged and having the right of accountability. And so the advisory board is important to me because no other department in Northampton has this type of structure. And it's important to me that we get it right.
Thank you. And there was one more minute for that. And do you want to use it for any other comment? Or, okay, you're good. Thank you both so much.
All right. Okay, now we're going to get to, it's going to be really crazy here because the candidates got to pick one of two questions for the next one and they picked different ones. So that's pretty fun. Oh no, that's, yeah. So for this, we have two choices, questions 7A and 7B, and Michael has chosen, I think, wait, we're going to start with Jamila. Jamila has chosen 7B. So I'm going to read that question, and then Jamila, you will have 2 minutes to answer it. The question says, in the recent policing bill passed in the Massachusetts legislature, the presence of a school resource officer, or SRO, is now determined by the school superintendent. In the context of Northampton area schools, what is your take on SROs? Who would you speak with to convey your opinions? 2 minutes.
So I would try to talk to the superintendent about my opinion about there not being SRO officers in the schools. I think that school is, you know, I grew up during the Columbine shooting, and then school got very militarized and we had to go through metal detectors. And I think, you know, having an SRO in school, it really kind of militarizes things, and it doesn't foster an open, educational, free and you know, calm environment. It really escalates things, I think. And I don't think it's particularly needed in Northampton. I think that when people go to school, they should go there to learn, to see their friends, to feel safe. But I think the presence of an officer can sometimes be, you know, alarming to kids. And I think that that should not be. And I would try to talk to the superintendent about that, because I think having the presence of an officer, it like when you have the presence of something, and it's like you're expecting something bad to happen. And I think that we need to not expect that our kids are going to do something that needs a punitive response or that needs the overseeing of an SRO. I think that we should expect that our kids are going to go to school to learn and to see their friends and to flourish in that way. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. And then Michael picked 7A. So I'll read that question. Then Michael, you'll have 2 minutes for that one. 7A says, given that the city of Northampton both owns lands and taxes residents that own property, how do you see the city beginning to reckon with its current benefit from the history of colonization and stolen land? And how could the city council begin to build relationships with Nipmuc and other indigenous leaders locally to attempt land rematriation and or other projects of addressing past and present harm? All right, 2 minutes for you, Michael.
Thank you very much. Recently, I was approached by a resident of Ward 1 suggesting that we place a land acknowledgement statement on the council agenda to be read at the beginning of each meeting, much like you did this evening. I began working on a proposal with another councillor. We gathered resources with the help of State Senator Joe Comerford and Rhonda Anderson, the Western Mass Commissioner on Indian Affairs. However, in light of the decision to cancel the biennial art show and recognizing the place of privilege I come from, it's become very clear that it needs to be 100% sure that we're doing this the right way and for the right reasons. Engaging with local Indigenous leaders to ensure that our statement is not performative or disrespectful in any way is a major priority for me to enact something like this. And I think an example of step one in a possible commitment to future relations with the Indigenous community. The erasure of the history of Indigenous people in our region, specifically here in Northampton. I think there's an opportunity to address that in our school department, bringing local Native leaders together with our school department to update the school's curriculum and to teach about the history of this land at a younger age. It's not something that we were taught right? When we were children, we were taught, the history of America from the people that came here to this land, but to try to create a curriculum that would teach about the Indigenous community here, I think would be really a great way, again, to just engage with the people of the Indigenous community. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, both of you.
And then Jane, I think we might have accidentally skipped to the, we could go back to the question about the mayor and city council right above 7.
Thank you. Yeah, I got ahead of myself a little bit. I got so excited about the choice making, I think. All right. So the next question is about the power balance between the mayor and the city councilors. You will each have 2 minutes to respond, and we'll start with Michael and move to Jamila. So in East Hampton, Springfield, and many cities across the country, the city council holds more legislative power than the Northampton City Council currently does. Would you advocate for the mayor city council power balance to change or stay the same? And please explain your answer. All right, go ahead, Michael, you'll have 2 minutes.
In my almost 2 years on the council, plenty of issues have arisen that make it very clear that the mayor's office has control of the city operation. The council has no control and input is extremely limited. For me, this isn't necessarily about getting more power or taking power away from the other office. This is about what's best for representing the people of Northampton. Having a legislative body with more opportunity and more teeth cannot be seen as a bad thing. Creating a more modern system under which the council would have more input, or at the very least be better informed, would be a good thing for Northampton and its residents. It would give us the opportunity to listen to people and then help act on creating a community where input is valued. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Jamila, would you like for me to read that again, or do you have a handle on it, do you think?
No, I got it.
Okay, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
So one of the things that if I'm elected to be on council that I would hope to be a part of is the Charter Review Commission, to look at the city charter and look at how it's structured, and it is an executive heavy kind of charter, and it gives the mayor a lot of power. And I've seen through people who've been on the council that I know and who've gotten on the council and said, you know, that they felt like their hands were tied when it comes to a lot of the decisions because the executive branch has so much power. So I would advocate for us to be like other cities and not have as much executive power and not have the mayor have as much power as the mayor does have. And I think it would be a better overall if the council could be a part of making more legislative decisions among themselves, because the council is 9 people and the mayor is only 1 person. And I think that we can bend the ear of the mayor and we can talk to the mayor and try to persuade the mayor, and so can the public. I've seen it happen and it's been really remarkable. But ultimately, I think right now, with the executive heavy system that we have, the mayor gets ultimate authority on a lot of things. But not to say that can't change. And I think it can, and I would want to work to change that.
Thank you both. So now I am going, for our next question, I'm going to read 3 key principles about disability justice. As you hear the principles, please indicate the level of your support and advocacy of it on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 means you would not advocate for it, and 10 meaning you would strongly advocate for it. You will have the opportunity, after rating your advocacy for all of them, you'll have 2 minutes to share your thoughts on why you chose the rating that you did. I'm going to start with Michael. So on a scale of 0 to 10, for the principle, all initiatives must be non-coercive and done with the consent of the person who needs support, care, or de-escalation.
10.
Okay. And for the principle, peer-led and initiated programming, resources, and support should be funded and prioritized over psychiatric facilities and interventions.
10.
Okay, and number 3, we must validate neurodivergent and/or disabled people's needs, desires, experiences, and leadership over those of professionals.
10.
Thank you. Okay, so please share any thoughts you'd like in 2 minutes.
I had all 3 principles as 10s because first, I find all 3 principles to be the basis for social justice, not just disability justice for all people. And when you look at these 3, I see they're very necessary for the Department of Community Care to be successful. You know, I just mentioned for the first one, in all nonviolent, non-criminal interactions with city services, a respectful, non-coercive, and cooperative interaction should be required. Through peer-led and initiated programming, you know, this is again something that I learned a tremendous amount about during the work of the Policing Review Commission, and I've come to agree that peer-led response is going to be vital to the success of the Department of Community Care. I think we had, Yaping and I had talked one day about this, and we were talking about how people get so comfortable with people that know where they're from, right? People that, you know, even if it's like your alumni association, you know, you may not be in there with someone that you went to school with and may be older or younger than you, but this connection to people that have been where you are or where you have been as well is really important to me. And then last, I think we need to learn as much as we can about helping people, you know, when you're talking about disabled people's, neurodivergent and disabled people's needs. Validation of experiences are important. You know, I said 10, but I wouldn't want to downplay the role of professionals who are trained to help as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And so now, Jamila, I'll run through the principles again, and then please rate your level of advocacy for the principles on a scale of 0 to 10 with 0 being that you would not advocate for it, and 10 meaning you would strongly advocate for it. And then after you share your ratings, you'll have 2 minutes to explain. So the first one, all initiatives must be non-coercive and done with the consent of the person who needs support, care, or de-escalation.
I would say a 10.
Okay, and number 2, peer-led and initiated programming, resources, and support should be funded and prioritized over psychiatric facilities and interventions.
I would say a 9 for that.
Okay, and number 3, we must validate neurodivergent and/or disabled people's needs, desires, and experiences and leadership over those of professionals.
I would say an 8 for that.
Okay, thank you. And if you could take 2 minutes to share your thoughts.
So I say a 10 for the first one because I think that anything that is coercion is not going to help de-escalate any situation, especially any physical type of coercion is definitely, as a no in my book, is something that I would advocate that doesn't happen at all on any level. The other two, I think about people in the fields to help people with disabilities and neurodivergent issues. And I think about there is a way that they have some type of expertise. And I've experienced it in my own life where sometimes peer-led interventions don't always work out in the safest and most responsible way. I wish that in a perfect world, the peer-led interventions and things like that would be all that we need. But I think that in a lot of ways, we do need professionals sometimes to step in and use their professional expertise. I mean, people go to school for a couple of years to learn about neurodivergent issues, to learn about disability issues, to get the expertise, and we should be able to use those people's expertise to deal with these issues that people may have. So that's why I rated those other two a little bit lower than the top one, but I would advocate for all three of them. But in my own personal experience, it's been kind of murky with the other two and not having the professional expertise on hand.
Okay, thank you both. For our last question, we'll start with you, Jamila, and end with Michael. You'll each have 2 minutes. We've heard a lot about community responders and police responses to situations, and the Northampton Policing Review Commission, in its final report, advocated for removing police from as many unnecessary interactions as possible to reduce the footprint of policing in the community. Can you describe what your vision for public safety is going forward, whether and where police fit in, and why you think that is the way forward to reduce the harms done by policing? Go ahead, Jamila.
So I think for the future, policing, I think, is something that needs to be obsolete at some point in the future. Policing as we know it, just the idea of people being policed is a very kind of archaic idea that we need somebody to police us. I really strongly believe in community, and I believe that we can take care of each other, and that we don't need armed professionals leaving a big footprint throughout our community and telling us, where to go, what to do, and how to interact with each other. Especially in Northampton, we're not a high crime community. We care about each other, and I think we could be a flagship city in responding to the policing issue in a whole different way. I mean, we could reimagine what we want in our city and what we want policing to look like, or not have, or what we want community safety to look like. And I think that we need not, co-responder models or reformist models. We need to have real members of the community who are willing to step out and be community care members. And, the Department of Community Care is a great start to that. And I'm very excited that the Policing Review Commission came out with that. I mean, Michael and all the people on the Policing Review Commission did so much good work to research and come up with this great plan for Northampton. I'm really looking forward to it. And I really would love to get on the council and be a part of working to get the Department of Community Care off the ground. And I think that's the future of Northampton, is that Department of Community Care, is the Community Resilience Center, is these community-based public safety taking care of each other places.
Thank you, Jamila. Michael, would you like me to reread the question or?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I think my position on public safety is pretty well documented, having now twice been a counselor going through the budget process here in Northampton. I believe that there's a lot of room to explore alternatives to policing, especially around social issues and crises. The list of responsibilities our police carry is very long, and allowing them to focus on the most dangerous of those responsibilities is a good idea, and it follows the recommendations of the Policing Review Commission. There are duties identified to remain in the hands of our police officers. I feel that I've listened and learned a lot about Northampton's public safety in the last 2 years. And the feeling that our community does not want to feel unsafe at all is very important. Conversations with many residents here has informed me that most people think the Department of Community Care is a great idea. But as I mentioned earlier a couple times, no one wants to feel unsafe by avoidance services. My goal of representing all people is to ensure safety to those people, and also to work as hard as it takes to make 911 a real, possible, and comfortable call for 100% of Northampton residents and guests. Thank you.
Wow, thanks so much. I learned so much tonight. That is the end of our questions. And I think it's probably going to be okay with the candidates to end a little bit early. Maybe you guys have a few things to do in the next 5 days. So I'm guessing you won't be super sad if we end a little early. So on behalf of NAN and Western Mass Surge, Jamila, Michael, thank you so much for taking time tonight to speak with us. We found this really illuminating and interesting, and constituents, thank you so much for tuning in to listen and learn. A recording of this program will be offered through Northampton Open Media. And candidates, good luck on Tuesday. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Get
night.
some sleep.